The dog had been waiting so long that the sound of waiting had become part of the landscape. The gate creaked sometimes in the wind, a hollow, uncertain noise that never led anywhere. Beyond it stretched a dirt road that no one had walked in years. Dust had grown into grass. Grass had learned the shape of stillness. The farmhouse behind him leaned slightly to one side, its paint cracked and bleached by sun. The windows were empty, glass long gone. Inside, birds nested in what had once been a kitchen. Rain had come through the ceiling too many times to count. And still, the dog waited. He was old now, the kind of old that makes time slow down. His fur had lost its shine, his ribs were visible beneath his skin, and his eyes carried a milky hue that made the horizon blur. Yet every morning, when the first pale light crawled across the fields, he rose, limped to the gate, and lay down in the same place. No one knew who he had belonged to anymore. The neighbors, the few that still remained, said there had once been a boy, a quiet one, who never shouted and always brought the dog bits of bread from the table. They'd seen him leave one morning with a suitcase, walking down the dirt road until the heat swallowed him. He never came back. The dog didn't understand leaving. He understood doors, gates, the sound of footsteps that meant return. Now the world had stopped making those sounds. The seasons changed, though not for him. Rain fell and grew weeds taller than his shoulders. Summer came and turned them to straw. Winter pressed frost into the cracks of the earth. Each time the light changed, the dog adjusted, digging shallow hollows in the soil, sleeping under the porch when the cold bit through his fur. But he never left the gate. Sometimes at dusk, the wind would push against the hinges, making them moan like a question. The dog would lift his head, ears twitching, eyes cloudy but alert. He would wait, body tensed, the way memory tenses before disappointment. Then, when nothing followed, he would lower his head again, sighing in that deep, slow way animals do when they are too tired to dream. He had forgotten what scent he was waiting for. The road smelled of nothing now. Dust, iron, dry weeds, the faint trace of storms that passed too high to reach the ground. But habit was older than understanding. At night, when the stars hung low enough to reflect in the puddle near the gate, he sometimes barked once. Not at anything, just to remind the silence that he was still here. And the silence, patient as earth, always took the sound and laid it gently back down beside him. One morning, a stranger came. A man in heavy boots, coat torn at the shoulder. He didn't carry a bag, just a stick he used as a cane. He stopped by the fence, looked at the house, then at the dog. The dog didn't move. The man knelt by the gate. "You've been here a long time," he said softly. His voice was cracked, as if it hadn't spoken in days. "You still waiting for him?" The dog blinked slowly, ears flicking once. He didn't bark. The man nodded. "I knew one like you." He waited too, for a sound that never came back. He reached out but didn't touch. His hand hovered above the dog's head, trembling slightly. The dog sniffed at the air between them. Faint smell of sweat, oil, and something distant, like rusted metal. After a moment, the man stood, tightened his coat, and looked down the road. "He's not coming, old friend," he said. The dog yawned, slow, tired. Then, without looking away from the road, he laid his head on his paws again. The man gave a small, broken laugh. "Yeah," he murmured. "Didn't think so." He walked away, his footsteps fading into the same quiet that had always been there. The gate swayed once behind him, creaking softly. When the wind died, everything went still again. The dog slept, and as he did, the shadows stretched across the field, folding over the gate, over the road, over the hollow where time had curled up and decided finally to rest beside him. The man came back 2 mornings later, walking the same road from nowhere. The sky was pale and flat, the kind that carried no promise of rain or warmth. The dog was at the gate, exactly as before, lying on his side, half in shadow, half in light. His breathing was shallow but steady, the kind that sounded like patience made audible. The man stopped a few steps away, adjusting the strap of the small canvas sack he had found somewhere since last time. He looked at the house, then at the gate, then at the dog. "You're still here," he said softly, as though surprised. The dog lifted his head just enough to see him, blinked once, and set it back down again. The man crouched, set the sack on the ground, and began to pull things from it: a piece of bread, a small tin cup, a folded knife, and a short length of rope. He poured a little water into the cup and pushed it toward the dog. "For you," he said. The dog didn't move at first, but the smell of the water, clean, untainted, was too much to ignore. He crawled forward, slow and stiff, and drank. The man smiled faintly. "There you go. Someone's got to look after you." He stayed for hours, not doing much, just sitting by the fence, cleaning his boots, watching the dust move when the wind rose. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable. It was old, like the kind that used to exist between people who had run out of words but not meaning. When the light began to fade, the man stood. "I'll come back," he said. "Don't go anywhere." The dog lifted one ear, a flicker of acknowledgement. The man left down the same road, his footsteps swallowed by the dry air. He returned the next day and the day after. Each time he brought something small: a piece of rope to fix the fence, a rusty hinge for the gate, a handful of oats he'd found in a broken silo. He never said why he kept coming back. Maybe he didn't know himself. On the fourth day, he found an old hammer in the house and began to work on the gate. The sound was jarring, metal against wood, but the dog didn't move. He only watched, his eyes following each movement. "You keep watch," the man said. "I'll mend what's left." He talked more as he worked, not the kind of talking that expects an answer, but the kind that keeps the air from growing too heavy. "I used to have one like you," he said one afternoon. "He'd wait by the window every time I left, even when there was nothing left to wait for." He paused, wiping his forehead with the back of his wrist. "Funny thing, waiting. Feels like faith until it doesn't." The dog blinked slowly, the corner of his mouth twitching in a movement that might have been a sigh or a memory. When the man finished the last hinge, he stepped back. The gate swung open easily for the first time in years. The sound was strange, gentle, new. He smiled. "There," he said. "Now if someone ever does come back, they'll find their way in." The dog didn't look at the gate. His eyes were still on the road. The man followed his gaze. The horizon shimmered in the heat, the road fading into white dust. There was nothing there, no figure, no movement, no promise, just distance. He sat down again beside the dog, resting his arms on his knees. "You don't give up, do you?" he said quietly. "Even when the world already has." The dog didn't answer, but when the man reached out this time, his hand found the top of the animal's head. The fur was coarse and warm. The dog didn't flinch. He just leaned into it slightly. It was the smallest movement, but it was enough. The man smiled, though his eyes were tired. "All right," he said. "Then we'll wait together." And so they did. Days bled into weeks. The man began sleeping on the porch, under what was left of the roof. He fixed what he could, patched a wall, cleared weeds, mended a shutter. The world didn't seem to notice. The road remained empty. The sky kept its silence. But there was something alive again in that small space between house and gate. Sometimes at dusk, the man would talk to the dog in a low voice, not because he expected him to understand, but because it helped the words mean something again. He spoke about the city he had left behind, about the bridges that had fallen, the ships that had stopped coming. He talked about the sound of engines that once filled the nights, and how quiet the world had become when they were gone. The dog would listen, ears half raised, eyes steady. At night, when the wind moved softly through the dry grass, the man thought he could hear another sound layered beneath it. Not a voice, not a word, but a rhythm. The slow, steady breathing of two living things that had decided to share the same stretch of waiting. And for the first time in a long while, the house didn't feel abandoned. The gate creaked in the dark, swinging just slightly with the night breeze. Its hinges no longer screamed. The sound was softer now, like a sigh made of wood and rust. The dog lifted his head once, looked at the road, and closed his eyes again. The man did the same. And in that moment, somewhere between dusk and sleep, time, for once, forgot to move. By the third week, the road had stopped meaning distance. It was just part of the sky now, a line of pale dust that caught light in the mornings and turned the color of ash by nightfall. The man and the dog watched it every day, the same way others once watched clocks, measuring not time, but endurance. The man had built a rhythm for himself. He woke when the first light broke through the cracked window pane. He gathered water from the rusted tank behind the house, boiled it over a small fire that smoked more than it burned. Then, he walked the fence, checking for gaps he already knew by heart. The dog followed, slow but constant, his steps leaving faint, uneven prints in the soil. He stopped often now, joints stiff, breath heavy, but he never turned away from the road. The man had started talking less. Words had lost their shape here, stretched thin by repetition. Even silence had texture now, a living thing that moved between them. He sometimes wondered if the dog heard it too, the subtle hum beneath the quiet, the sound of time breathing very slowly through the land. One morning, the man found something near the edge of the property, a child's shoe, half buried in the dirt. The leather was cracked, the laces stiff, the color long gone. He turned it over in his hands, studying the smallness of it, the way it still held the curve of a foot that had once run somewhere. He brought it back to the gate and placed it on the post. "Someone came through here," he said. "Once." The dog sniffed at it, then sat down beside the gate, as if the object were proof that waiting still had meaning. That night, as the wind moved through the empty fields, the man dreamed of footsteps. Not many, just one pair, small, running. The sound was sharp and quick, the kind that made dust rise and settle again before it could be seen. When he woke, the sound lingered in his head, like something half remembered from another life. In the morning, he checked the road. There were no prints, only the same unbroken layer of dust and light. The dog, though, was standing now, ears pricked, nose lifted slightly. The man froze. "What is it?" The animal didn't move. His tail gave a slow, uncertain twitch, and then he sat again, facing the same direction he always did. The horizon was empty, but for the first time in years, the air carried something new. Not a smell, not a sound, just the faint tension of change. By midday, clouds gathered over the far hills. They weren't dark enough to promise rain, but their presence alone was strange. The man watched them roll slowly across the sky, shading the fields. He felt the air shift, cooler, heavier, like the world was remembering weather. The dog rose once more, walked to the gate, and pressed his muzzle against the wood. The man followed, standing beside him. "Feels different, doesn't it?" he said. The gate creaked in the soft wind. The smell of wet earth drifted faintly through the still air. That evening, they sat together in silence. The clouds thickened but held their rain, the sky bruised and quiet. The man's hands rested on his knees, the dog's head on his paws. Then, a sound. Faint, distant, but unmistakable. The man's eyes snapped open. It was not wind, not thunder, not machinery. It was softer, lighter, the steady rhythm of something moving across dust. Footsteps. He stood, heart pounding, staring down the road. But there was nothing to see. Only haze, light, the trembling of heat. Still, the sound came again. The dog stood too. His ears turned forward, his whole body leaning toward the horizon. A low whine slipped from his throat, the kind that comes from hope too old to trust itself. The man whispered, "Someone's coming." They waited. Minutes stretched. The sound did not grow nearer, but it didn't fade either. It was as if the road itself was remembering what footsteps sounded like. Finally, the wind rose, the sound vanished. The man stayed standing long after it was gone. "Maybe it was nothing," he said softly. But even as he spoke, he didn't believe it. The dog sat again, slower this time, his breath ragged. He looked up once, eyes cloudy, then turned back toward the road, as if refusing to break faith. Night fell. The clouds broke apart, spilling a few drops of rain, the first in months. The man lifted his face to it, eyes closed. The water smelled like old stone and forgotten seasons. Beside him, the dog tilted his head, letting the drops darken his fur. For the first time since the man had come, the dust on the road began to shift, faint ripples spreading across its surface. No footsteps appeared, but the marks of the rain were enough, proof that the world could still move. The man smiled. "Looks like you were right to wait," he said. The dog didn't move. His eyes were closed, his chest rising slow even. The rain fell harder now, washing the gate clean, turning the road dark and shining. The man watched it, feeling something in him, something old, dry, stubborn, begin to loosen. And when he looked down again, the dog was asleep. Not the kind of sleep that waits for noise, but the kind that comes when time itself finally decides to rest. The man knelt, resting a hand on the animal's back. "All right," he whispered. "I'll keep watch for a while." The rain kept falling soft and endless until the sound filled everything. The road, the house, the fields, all of it breathing together again. And for the first time in years, the gate stood open. The rain lasted through the night. It wasn't heavy, just steady. The kind that soaks everything evenly. The kind that cleans without trying to. By dawn, the air smelled new. The dust had turned to clay. The grass along the fence stood darker, bent under the weight of water. The road was a mirror now, reflecting a sky the color of pewter. The man woke where he'd fallen asleep, on the porch, knees drawn up, back against the wall. His shirt was damp, his hands stiff with cold. He blinked at the gray light, unsure if it was morning or something beyond it. The gate was open, and the dog was gone. For a long moment, he didn't move. He only watched the space where the dog had been, the hollow in the mud where the body had lain, still dark from the night's rain. The ground looked soft, undisturbed. There were no prints leading away. He rose slowly, joints aching, and stepped into the yard. The air was heavy, but the silence was different now. Not the silence of emptiness, but the silence of something completed. He called out once, softly, "Hey, old boy." No answer. Only the sound of water dripping from the eaves. He crossed to the gate, his boots sinking slightly into the wet soil. Beyond it, the road stretched pale and endless again, steam rising where the first touch of sun reached the mud. He looked both ways, though he already knew. The road was empty. He leaned against the gatepost, hands gripping the damp wood. His voice was rough when he spoke. "You waited as long as you could, didn't you?" The wind came then, faint, almost tender, moving through the grass, making the gate sway once. The hinges whispered softly, a sound so small it could have been imagined. He smiled, though the expression hurt. "Yeah," he said. "Ah, me too." He stood there for a while, watching the clouds shift across the pale sky. The world felt fragile, like it had just been remade, thin and shining, still deciding whether to keep breathing. When the sun finally broke through, it came without warmth, just a dull brightness that flattened the landscape. The house behind him looked smaller in the light, the fence newer, the fields endless again. Everything clean, colorless, temporary. He walked back toward the porch, stopping once to glance over his shoulder. The open gate framed the road perfectly, the line where the horizon met the earth. He thought of closing it but couldn't bring himself to. Inside, he boiled water. The kettle hissed quietly, the sound filling the room in a way that almost felt like company. He poured it into a tin cup and set a second one beside it out of habit. Then he stopped himself, staring at the two cups, at the thin steam curling between them. After a while, he took the extra cup and placed it by the window. Outside, a single bird crossed the field, a dark shape cutting through the washed-out light. He hadn't seen one in months. It circled once, twice, then vanished into the low clouds. He exhaled slowly, a sound halfway between a sigh and a laugh. "Guess someone had to take over the watch," he murmured. The day stretched on without moving. The air grew warmer, the puddles began to dry, the mud cracked and flaked into dust again. By afternoon, the only sign of the rain was the smell of it, that faint sweetness that lingers after the world remembers it can change. The man sat on the porch, the same place the dog had waited all those years. He kept his eyes on the road. He didn't expect anything, not really. But still, when the wind shifted, he found himself listening. He could almost hear it. The faint jingle of a collar, the soft pads of paws on wet earth, the slow exhale of something lying down beside him. He smiled without turning his head. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I know. I'll stay a while." The sun dipped lower, the light stretching long across the fields. The shadows of the gateposts reached all the way to the house, touching the porch steps like fingers. He leaned back, eyes half closed, and let the silence settle. Time, which had once ruled this place so ruthlessly, began to soften again. It spread thin and gentle, the way sleep spreads through tired limbs. The road stayed empty. The gate stayed open. And in that stillness, in that small, unremarkable piece of the world, time finally stopped counting, finally closed its eyes, and slept beside the man who had learned how to wait.